بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مساء الخير, مساء السرور. Good evening. I think I'm going to speak in English because I think Dr. Sisi said if you speak in Arabic, you're going to have major problems. So I'm going to speak in English. Since the book is about English and written in English, so I'm going to speak in English. My name is Khalid Janahi. I have the unfortunate problem that to be sitting here because this gentleman on my left made 3 mistakes. Mistake number 1, he said, I want to launch my book in Bahrain before anywhere else in the GCC after Saudi. I said, fine. Mistake number 2 he made, he said, I would like you to moderate the session for me. I said, okay. And then the fatal mistake that he made, he said, please don't be nasty to me. So by saying that, it's difficult not to be nasty to him. I've known this gentleman on my left for over 15 years. He thinks he knows me. He doesn't know me at all. But he thinks I'm his friend, which is true. But he's not a friend of mine. So I just want to make that very, very clear so nobody takes us anywhere from the discussion that we're going to have. Faisal, this is, I think, your 3rd book? Second book. This is his 2nd book. I was actually fortunate to be at the launch in the main country that published the book, which is the place that the book is all about, in UK. I was there with His Highness Sheikh Prince Khalid bin Bandar, the ambassador to Saudi Arabia, to London, to our United Kingdom. And it was a fantastic launch. The words that I heard from Prince Khalid were very friendly, very sort of, not just friendly, someone who knows this gentleman very, very well. And it came across very well. And I was invited to a dinner after that, which was well attended. And I think 1 or 2 people here, they were at the dinner or pre-dinner of that evening. Now, the book is an interesting book. He spent I think actually it's more than 10 years, but he says it's 10 years in England, in London, during the tough times and good times. So he's seen it all there. The one thing I would say, I mean, I've written some notes here, but I don't want to mention the notes, but one thing I would say that I always believe that if you spend more than 5 years in England, either you become a sarcastic person like they are, or you basically leave the country. And he made a mistake. He didn't leave and he's not sarcastic. Unlike myself, I am cynical, I'm sarcastic. As a Bahraini, not that many of us are, we understand the word sarcasm, but now it's run in my DNA, not because of Bahrain, but because of London. So without further ado, I would like actually, Faisal, if you can, just give us a feel of the book and why you wrote the book and the way you did it.
Thank you, Khalid. Allow me to say a few words in Arabic first. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولاً سمو الشيخ، أصحاب المعالي، سعادة القائم بالأعمال، سعادة السفيرة، الزملاء والأعزاء، يعني أنا أشعر نفسي في بيتنا الثاني في البحرين. وتعمدت أبدأ طبعاً باللغة العربية احتراما لها وتقديرا لثقافتنا وحضارتنا، لكن كما تفضلت الكتاب باللغة الإنجليزية، استأذنكم أني أكمل النقاش باللغة الإنجليزية من بعد إذنكم.
And he's very diplomatic, by the way. I intentionally didn't say what he said because I knew he's going to say it. So carry on.
So and thank you for the sarcastic yet warm, as long as it's from the heart, which is what this book is. I think we can welcome anything. Arguments usually are 85% how you say the argument, but 15% the actual argument. And I think it was I don't want to say sarcastic, but critical when needed to be critical, praiseworthy when it was praiseworthy. But at the end of the day, the idea behind the book is at some point I felt there are enough books written about the Middle East, about Saudi Arabia, about Bahrain, by Orientalists, whether they have an agenda or whether they are sincere, whether they are extremely knowledgeable or misguided. And as you rightly pointed out, I lived in the United Kingdom long enough to understand the mannerisms, long enough to understand the humor, long enough to understand the culture. And His Royal Highness Prince Khalid alluded to that, saying, you know, it's about time somebody told the story from the other side. So what I seek to do with this book is try to explain how British life, British society, British culture, British habits look from an Arab perspective. And what it serves is, hopefully, it will educate somebody who is British a little bit more about the Arab world, and somebody who's Arab a little bit more about Britain.
I mean, reading the book, you're first and foremost, I think, actually, if it was the other way around, an Orientalist had written the book about our part of the world, the way Faisal has written the book about the Brits, I don't think he will be allowed to speak here. And that says a lot about the British perspective and British humor, and accepting that sarcasm and cynicism actually is part of the culture, which is an important thing. Let me ask you a question now, because we all know, we all go to London. I am, by the way, one thing I told them day one when the book was launched, that I disagree about the title, because it is more London, because he's a Londoner. I am Mancunian, I'm from Manchester. So it has got a strange connotations that some of it is not the same as in Manchester or wherever. But let me, like a Mancunian going to London, what would you say, and I'm going to dare to ask that question, what would you say is one of the worst parts of the British culture that you, during your time, you saw and you felt?
No, thank you for that question. I wouldn't say it's the worst part. Everything, once you come to understand and you dig beneath the surface, everything has a reason. But I think I explained it very well, that I felt that the British were slightly cold and distant in the beginning, especially in my first few months or the first year. I think the actual quote was, at one point I felt establishing contact with an alien would have been easier than making friends with a British person. And, you know, it takes longer to crack, but once you are in deep. And I now have friends for life or for more than 20 years with genuine, real relationships and very deep friendships. But, you know, it was a huge cultural shift. And I also write in the book, where I actually did my book launch in the United Kingdom is a bookstore on Marylebone High Street called Don't Books. It's the International Travelers book store. And I used to spend hours there in my first few days, and I learned the meaning of when we say in Arabic, وَخَيْرُ جَلِيسٍ فِي الزَّمَانِ الْكِتَابُ, and I understood why. And one of the best books that I bought was called Watching the English. And once I read that book, it was like a guide to understand the society. And for instance, I realized that my approach to people was very Arab, if you want, which is very appropriate if we are here in Bahrain or in Saudi or in Egypt, to ask personal questions or to be there. And then I realized why the British are so fascinated with the weather, for example. So apparently, you don't go and ask somebody, how are you, if you want to start a conversation. You go and say, the weather is rather cold today, or the weather is rather hot today. And then if the other party wishes to continue the conversation, they would say something like, it is, isn't it? And then that's a cue for starting the conversation. But you have to understand, because in the psyche of British people, privacy is very important. And people do not like, unlike perhaps some of the stereotypes, people do not like to offend. So people would rather not tell you, sorry, I'm busy, I don't want to talk to you, or I don't feel comfortable talking to you. So when you start with these safe topics, it's usually a way to open a conversation without putting pressure on the other side.
Yeah, I'd agree on that. Actually, back in 1982, with I think it was the Falkland Island, the war, I was the only one in a firm of 300 people who were all Brits that I was against and talking against the British doing what they were doing. But I would think, actually, if I was doing that in other places, in other countries, I would have been in deep, deep trouble. But matter of fact, I was not. It was easy discussions, so you give and take. And that is something that I learned from the Brits, unfortunately. And I don't want to give the Brits any credit, but I did learn that from the Brits, that they are very much open-minded, so you have your views, I have mine, so there is that mutual respect from the viewpoint. But one point you made, which is interesting, when you said they are difficult to crack, but once you crack, you're in. Actually, that reminds me of Saudi Arabia, because in Najd, okay, it takes a long time to crack, but once you crack, you are there. You go to Jeddah or you go to Sharqiya, no, that's very, very quick. It's just like Bahrain, you know, it's an easy thing to do. So I feel there is a bit of similarity from that perspective of getting to know and to be liked by people. But now let me turn it the other way around. We talked about the bad side. What about one of the greatest things that you felt with the British culture?
Well, there's certainly a lot, but I think I might have mentioned this with Her Excellency the Sheikha this morning when I visited and I oversaw the great work they do in this center, which actually reminds me of the United Kingdom. One thing I really respect about the British, and we are, I think, just starting to do it in our part of the world, is the preservation of heritage and preservation of culture. You know, perhaps sometimes when you're a tourist passing by, you don't notice these things. But if you walk in London, you will see a little door or a little window, and there's a blue plaque on top of it, and say, for example, Isaac Newton lived here, or some famous musician lived here. And you're not allowed to touch that place, you're not allowed to change anything. If you go something like the National Archives or the British Library, I'll tell you a small story. It's Arab related, not necessarily related to Bahrain, but related to the topic that we're talking about. When I was living in the United Kingdom, the television series about the late King Farouk came out on NBC. It's about 10 or 15 years ago. And there is a fascination with the last king of Egypt. And I remember going to the British Library, and only in the UK was it this easy and accessible. But I actually found a series of articles he's written in a British newspaper as a memoir. And I photocopied them all, and that turned out to be quite an exclusive for me as a journalist in time with the launch of the TV series. So the article was, you've seen the series, here is what the late king has said in his actual words, which are only available in the United Kingdom in the National Archives. Similarly, about Bahrain, there is 200 years of history that I guarantee you every moment was properly documented in a document in the National Archives or in the British Library. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. The late Queen Elizabeth, for example, it's remarkable. She has known every Saudi king since the founder, since King Abdulaziz, Allah yarhamah. So, if you ask me what is the trait that I really admire about the British, is this preservation of heritage and culture.